Hi, and welcome to today's Audience with Aerospace Mission to Mars with special guests from the Mars Analog crew. I'm Lauren Gandera, an outreach coordinator with the Aerospace Corporation, and I am so excited that you are joining us for today's visit. During today's presentation, please come on camera, stay muted unless speaking, and be sure to participate through the chat and reaction features. Just a reminder, today's presentation will be recorded. Today, we will review the Mars Analog mission, where aerospace employees lived in a simulated Mars environment to test and research technology, complete training, and more. Before I introduce today's guests, I will be sharing a link to a video about the Aerospace Corporation. Please watch this video on your own time to learn more about what we do here at the Aerospace Corporation. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Alex Diaz. Alex is a senior project leader at the Aerospace Corporation and was an advisor and crew alternate for Crew 269 at the Mars Desert Research Station. He was also the commander for 4 different rotations at MDRS. Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Lauren, so much for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here with members of Crew 269 who are completing their Mars Analog mission tomorrow. I know they're very busy finishing their tasks, so we're very thankful that they're here with us to talk about their mission. As you may know, NASA is planning to send humans back to the moon in a few years and onto Mars in the next decade. So one of you could very well be one of the lucky ones that gets to go. That is so exciting. That is why we're very happy to be talking to you all today. So let me take a moment to introduce all of our special guests. Dr. Christine Ferrone is the crew commander and a senior engineer specialist at the Aerospace Corporation. Ali Taylor is the executive officer on this mission and a senior project leader at Aerospace. Barbara Braun is the health and safety officer for the crew and a principal director at Aerospace. Trevor Jan is a crew technology officer and a senior member of the technical staff at Aerospace. Matthew Eby is the Green Hub officer of this mission and a member of the technical staff at Aerospace. And last but not least, Ashley Kowalski is a crew engineer and a project leader at Aerospace. Please join me with your reactions in welcoming the crew. Hey, thank you guys. Another crew is going to present a brief overview of their mission, but before we hand it off to them, we have a quick poll question for you guys. And the question is, why do we use analog missions? A, is it to complete experiments that need space-like environments? B, they're quicker and less expensive than going to space? C, they provide a place to test experiments and solve problems without being in space? Or D, all of the above? Yeah, there we go. We're getting a lot of answers. Yes, definitely. The correct answer is all of the above. Analogs are essentially places where we can test new technologies and operations before they are used in space. But to tell us more about these analogs, I'm going to hand it over to Ali, who will let us know more about them.
Hi, everybody. So we use analogs on Earth to replicate as much of the space environment as possible. It allows us to go and test experiments in places that are similar to other planets without having to, like the answers in the poll said, without having to spend a lot of money to actually go to that place. It allows us to conduct operations and to get all of the crew working together and trying to replicate as much as possible without actually being launched into space. So it's good for training, and there's a lot of places on Earth that are extreme environments. I know NASA has a couple of analog locations. For example, one of them is in the ocean underwater. So we can be out in the desert, we can be underwater, we can go to Antarctica. And so this location here, we are in Utah in the desert, and it's a very similar terrain to what you can expect on Mars.
Okay, Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the experiments that we brought with us on this mission. So Aerospace Corporation has lots of different scientists and engineers that work there that can come up with a vast variety of things for us to test in an analog environment. So just a few of these examples we brought this time. A couple of these are, if you look at the top there where it says high altitude balloon, Matt Eby, who's standing right behind me, this was his experiment. So he's able to utilize some spare parts and a low-cost experiment to launch a weather balloon from the Mars environment, the Mars analog environment. We just did that yesterday. So we're able to show that the crew could execute this in a spacesuit and in an analog Mars environment. And we were able to track the weather balloon for several hours after it was launched. And it got, I received a lot of data from it. Also, we have an experiment on a mirror surface coating, which is used for different applications in both satellites and in potentially future long duration spacecraft. And we did an exposure exercise with that, where these samples were placed out in the extreme environment and then were brought back in for analysis under microscope at different points during the mission. In the center there, you see the EVA tools. EVA stands for extravehicular activity, and that's when we go outside in our spacesuit. On the left is a radiation dosimeter, and this is a device that can measure the radiation environment. And I was using this tool to create sort of a map of where there's areas of high and low radiation dose, so that that could be used on Mars to help the crew find places that would be more sheltered from radiation. And right next to that is a rake and scoop example. Ali right here next to me, she had led this experiment where we were using these tools in an analog spacesuit to see how well we could collect samples of the regolith, or the soil on Mars. And then we collected those into some sample bags that Ali had brought to see how well we could do that with our big gloves and spacesuits. And that was successful. Then on the right, Project Phantoms, led by Trevor, who's in the Santa hat. And this was a virtual reality and augmented reality demonstration. So Trevor collected data via several methods with different types of cameras, also a drone. He also collected data using a virtual reality headset, and then he was able to demonstrate that he could not only collect data in a Mars analog environment, but also start to use that data to allow the crew to see notations of where interesting locations might be on the surface. And that's what that bottom right image is in the view of the headset, that he could see notations kind of in an augmented reality environment. So this is just an example of some of the experiments that we brought. There were some others as well, but these were some of the highlights, and we can go on to the next topic.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about life in the habitat here. So the main tall module that you see in the left photo, it's a cylindrical module. That is our main living habitat. So there's 2 floors in there. You can see the floor plan in that center photo there. And on the bottom floor, that's where we keep our extravehicular activity suits, or EVA suits. That's where we have our toilet and shower area. It's where we have our pressurization airlock when we come in and out of EVAs. And it's also where we have our door to get to all of the other modules. And so our rear airlock connects to various tunnels that take us to different modules. One is the repair and assembly module, where we have a lot of tools in there to make different inspections and repairs to different items. For example, we did have to do some repairs to our EVA suits during this mission. So we have all tools that we need to do that there. We also have a science dome where we can do different types of inspections and analysis. So for example, that's where we held our aerospace microscope to do the mirror coating inspections that our Commander Christine just spoke about. We also had an observatory and a greenhouse area, a greenhouse. And we did actually, so the greenhouse was run by our green hat officer, Matt, right next to me. And we were able to actually harvest some of the greens in there to have some fresh salads and just some fresh fruit, fresh vegetables in our during our time here. That's the main segments of our living area. And then, of course, you can see the surrounding environment around us every time we step out of our habitat. So anytime we step out of the tunnels, outside of the modules, we have to don the EVA suit. So it's a slight difference between inside and outside, of course.
And we should actually point out that we're coming to you from the top floor of that habitat.
I didn't even speak about the top floor. I'm sorry. I spoke about the bottom floor and I forgot about the top floor. And the top floor is where we have our 6 individual bedrooms, where we have our private space. This is where our kitchen is. And that is, as Barbara mentioned, exactly where we're coming from right now. And so I think that's it.
And we're also asking our participants today, what food do you eat in a Mars research station?
Yeah, let's see what the answer is.
We should point out too that the each of those little bedrooms that we have is about the size of a closet. It's really, really small. Not a walk-in closet either. More like, you know, a regular under the stairs hallway closet.
Has enough room for the bare essentials, a small bed and some small storage areas and a small desk. So we have the results of our poll here. So the question was, what food do you like to eat in the Mars? Do you eat in the Mars research station? And while all of those answers could be applicable, the correct answer is the bottom one. Only non-perishable packed food and food grown in the green have. That is correct. So while we did eat a lot of potatoes here, there is of course no delivery, and we have all shelf-stable, non-perishable packaged items that we're using here.
So once we put on our EVA suits, we have a wonderful environment to explore outside. It's about the size of a small city, so 45 square miles. But unlike a city, there are no houses, there's no other people around, so it's just us to explore this wonderful environment. It's very Mars-like, so it's a landscape of red rocks, canyons, ridges, and buttes. Interestingly, there's no permanent water features, so there's no rivers, there's no lakes. Just like we see on Mars, it's very dry. However, the landscape is carved up by water features, so there's lots of gullies and washes. Again, just like we see on Mars.
Okay, and then as we've been discussing, we used our habitat and all of our science facilities, as well as the surrounding environment, to conduct a lot of our experiments. Christine already talked a good bit about a lot of the experiments we did while on EVA, on our extravehicular activities, and you can see a picture of all of us out there on extravehicular activity on the right-hand side of this slide. But we also did a lot of experiments inside the Science Dome. There's a picture of Ashley in the middle doing the examinations of the mirror coating experiment there. We also had some fitness gear that we were testing out, and a communication server that we were testing out. Some of you participated in that communication server, I think, that simulated the amount of time it takes. So if I send a text to you from Mars, it takes 5 minutes right now, and it can take as long as 20 minutes when Mars is on the other side of the sun from us for that text to reach you, to even show up on your phone. And then if you wanted to text me back, it would take another anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes, depending on the time of year, for that text to reach me. So we had a little server that simulated that. So in addition to all of the research that we were doing and all of the experiments that we were trying to conduct, we also had a lot of maintenance activities. And that included things like fixing our spacesuits and making dinner and cleaning up after ourselves. And we had times when we had power that was, our power is mostly provided by solar arrays. So we had a couple of overcast days, or you might think of them like days where there were a lot of dust storms on Mars, that we had to really conserve power. We also had problems with our toilet, which led to a somewhat unpleasant day where we had to troubleshoot our toilet, just like we would as if we were on Mars, without any plumber that we could call up to fix our toilets. So in and around all of this day-to-day activities, sleeping, eating, going to the bathroom, and trying to get our research in, we also had to do repairs and maintenance on the facility here in order to kind of keep it all running as you would if you were on a remote space station on Mars. And then you can see here, there's a picture of me doing some repairs on our spacesuits. We had a lot of difficulty with the batteries on our spacesuits, keeping them all fully charged. And it's not very good to go out of the airlock with a spacesuit that has a bad battery. So we had to make sure that everything was working before we exited. Okay, I think then the next chart, maybe a little more about life here.
And this one's me. So life here begins at about 7:30 a.m. and we all gather together, eat breakfast together, talk about the plan of the day. and go about our business. And we've all got a lot of different things to do, but even though we're very busy, a lot of the work that we do is fun to do because we've never done it here before. So I was very fortunate enough to get to fly Vixel, our drone, around and explore the area from the sky. And here it is. And I got to drive a remote control rover around and get some video from some of the cameras we had on that. And other people.
Looks like we have a slow connection with our crew. Alex, a question came in.
Being here is we're so far away from cities and all the bustling of lights and all of that at night we get to go out to our observatory and we get to be reminded our place in the universe, and we get to look at the beautiful night sky. And I remember the first night that we got here, the moon had set, so there was no moon on the night sky for us, and the whole night sky lit up like a Christmas tree, and there were so many lights, and all we could do is just keep taking photos for more than an hour. And ever since the first night, we've gone out and we've looked at the moon. We've watched the moon slowly every night turn into a full moon, and last night it just lit up the entire desert landscape. And in all, we get to work hard, but it's rewarding and it's really interesting stuff. A lot of us have been on really great adventures to collect soil samples all over the place here in the desert. And of course, we get to enjoy each other at the end of the evening, playing board games and getting to know each other. And we get to see the beautiful night sky every night. And it just really tells you why you're here and what you're doing it for.
And a question came through in the chat that I think would be great to address on this slide, since there's a photo of the greenhouse. What food did you grow in the garden?
So there's a variety of food at various stages, from new seedlings to plants that are starting to flower. So we have tomatoes, carrots, onions, microgreens, which are like small lettuce. We have beans that are going, peas, sugar peas. And right now, what's in harvest right now are the leafy vegetables, so the small greens and the small carrot tops. So we've been adding those to the tops to get a little bit of fresh food.
Great variety. Thank you for answering.
Gillis's class at Balls Bluff Elementary that actually participated with us on the Discord server. So thank you so much for doing that. We were able to answer questions when we gathered for dinner here at night. We were done with our day, and they named our drone Vixel.
We got a great shot there of Trevor operating the drone in his spacesuit out on the Mars surface, or the simulated Mars surface. And kind of a glamour shot there with Vixel in the foreground and our habitat in the background.
And it was so much fun flying Vixel, and I was amazed because I took so many photos and was able to create a 3D model of the area. So thank you for the wonderful name and the wonderful questions.
Yes, thank you to Mrs. Gillis's class. Okay, well, thank you, crew, for that amazing overview. I am very impressed, as I'm sure everyone online is as well, with everything you've been able to accomplish this past couple of weeks at MDRS. Seeing your slides definitely brings back a lot of great memories from my experience at MDRS. So now we'd like to take some questions from you. What I'll do is select some questions from the chat or some that have been previously submitted, and I'll direct them to the crew. So one that I see on the chat right here is, how did you build a habitat? I'll direct it to Christine. Granted, I know you guys weren't part of the development process, but maybe talk more about why Hanksville, that area was selected. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, so this area in Utah, the climate and the geography and the geology is very similar to what we can observe about Mars. So the Mars Society, when they were looking for places to do an analog Mars mission, they actually have two. Well, I think there's even a third or fourth, but the two that I've been to is here in near Hanksville, Utah, which is in a desert area. And the other one is in Devon Island in Canada, near the North Pole. And that one is particularly interesting too, because it has a very large meteor crater right next to the habitat. So they can do exploration of that crater as well. So a lot of the things that go into a decision of where to place it, some logistical things such as ease of resupply and things like that are taken into account, but some of the biggest considerations are how similar is it to Mars. And so the scientists look at a lot of different aspects of the location and pick a location that is as similar as possible. And there are things that will always be Earth-like. Things like we did have some snow while we were here. And that's not typical of something that you would see on Mars, but it's something we handled and worked in to our mission plan. So you'll always have elements that will be different since it is Earth and not Mars, but we'll look for places that are the most similar as we can. This habitat itself, one of the reasons that it's shaped the way it is, that cylindrical, is supposed to simulate something that could be launched on a rocket. And if you've seen pictures of rockets before, you notice that they're typically cylindrically shaped. And the habitat would fit into what's called a launch fairing, and it would allow it to be launched on a typical type of rocket. So when you see the habitat looking like they call it a tuna can or a cylinder, that's because that's a shape that would be easily launched. Also things with the habitat, the reason why it is constructed the way that it is that it would be easy to assemble additional parts and modules to it on the surface. So if you saw a picture of the tunnels that we have and the additional modules, that each one of those is constructed in a way that would be considered a typical way of doing construction on the surface of another planet. So the science dome, for example, sort of that dome shape, something that would be easier to assemble on the surface of a planet than its traditional sort of box shape that you would think of like a house or a building on Earth. Anything anyone else wants to add?
Yeah, and I should point out that we did not actually build the habitat that we're staying in.
It was built in the early 2000s. Yeah.
Yes, by the Mars Society. And so they have a rotating set of crews that come through, and we are crew 269, which means that there's been 269 crews coming and using this facility for short periods of time each. And we'll be leaving here tomorrow, and then the next crew will come in.
And one of the modules was actually made from the fuselage of a helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been interesting to see that as well.
It's an interesting insight, Trevor. Okay, good answer. Thank you, guys. We have another question here that's really interesting. It says, how do you simulate actual Mars environments to make results in your testing be similar to what you would get on Mars? Now, granted, we understand that you can't simulate the pressure or the atmospheric composition of Mars. So you guys focus more on operational development, perhaps. So talk a little bit more about that, Ali, and let us know how we try to compare or make the results similar to what we're expecting Mars.
Yeah, so I think for one of the experiments we did collecting samples, that's a really good experiment to show operationally how astronauts in a spacesuit have a little bit more challenge with the dexterity, using their hands with the gloves. And so we got some tools that are very kind of similar to what the astronauts brought to the moon, and did some raking and scooping of the dirt, which is regolith on another planet. And then we kind of just went through the operations of collecting that and putting it into a special handheld sifter, which really is just a off-the-shelf flour sifter, which is a tool that you would use in your kitchen. And in order to filter some of the big rocks out, and then collected that sample in a bag. And so that was just showing operationally how we might do that on another planet. So I think that was pretty successful. And then yesterday with the balloon launch, you know, Matt's done that a few times on Earth, and we thought it would be very interesting to show how we could do that operationally on Mars. And so really it was just challenges of coming in and out of our airlock. We had time constraints to account for pressurization and repressurization. So he actually had to come back in at one point to help troubleshoot something. So we had some challenges and delays. So it makes it a little extra challenging than just conducting the experiment as you would in any location. And then of course, being out really far in the middle of nowhere, we can't just phone our friends for help. We have to rely on each other or or our Discord server to send questions back and forth to some of our investigators at the Aerospace Corporation to ask questions to inform what we were going to do the next day.
Yeah, and I was going to add too, it's not just the outside environment, it's also the inside environment. And, most of the experiments that I was working on were inside, including the Discord server, and the fact that when we had to ask a question of an experimenter back on Earth, we had to wait 10 minutes for the answer to come in. Then even the fitness equipment, right? We don't have room to go for a nice long run or, jog a mile around the block or and if we were in a low gravity environment, we couldn't even use weights or dumbbells to provide that. So we were checking out, the being in an isolated facility, even one that looks like Mars, but also one where your living space is like it would be on Mars, means that you get to experiment with things like, okay, how does texting work, these time-delayed texting, to get answers to questions, to stay in touch with your friends and family, and how do you exercise when you don't have really an awful lot of space to set up a big gym to go through your normal workout.
Great answer. Yeah, it highlights how difficult it is to work in a isolated, extreme environment situation, right? So good job, guys. Hey, I have a question for Matt. This is regarding food. So the question is, what did you guys eat for breakfast today?
Well, today was a special day because we knew you guys would be on, so we wanted to have a big breakfast and get all ready and be happy. So we made a big pancake breakfast. So we have powdered pancake mix, similar to what you'd find at your grocery store, and it's the kind you just have to add water. So it's not the best, but it's pretty good, pretty darn good. And we also have a special bottle of maple syrup.
And blueberries.
The dehydrated blueberries.
Dehydrated blueberries. So they don't taste quite as good as real blueberries. Well, they are real blueberries, but they're a little bit crunchy.
Sounds good. Hey, related to that, another question is, can you guys eat candy or spicy foods at MDRS?
Oh, yeah. We did bring a big bottle of, not bottle, but a big container of very spicy, like cayenne seasoning that I know that Ashley and I were adding to just about everything. Ashley, I don't know if you want to talk about the strong desire for spicy food. Sometimes the food that we eat can be kind of bland, and so we just.
Yeah, I mean, I not too much to add there, but basically, yeah, once you need to have some kind of you start missing the regular flavors of your normal earthly foods, especially when we're just trying to be creative with the dehydrated foods that we have here. And so adding a lot of, salt and pepper and different spices to our food really helps our well-being, and it helps us, stay positive also. So you really start to realize how much food has an impact on, your well-being and your daily life here in this kind of isolated environment.
And yes,
Definitely.
we did have candy.
And yes, did have candy.
Too much.
Food will definitely be a challenge that we'll have to think about for deep space missions for sure. Hey guys, let me ask you a question now from that was previously submitted. I'll ask it to Trevor. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced while completing your research?
That's a really great question. So for my research, I needed to be outside a lot. And we were very lucky to have a wonderful snowfall a couple of days ago. And it was so much fun in the morning to be in the observatory and enjoy the snow. But within a few hours, the snow started melting and everything outside got really muddy, and we weren't allowed to go outside for a few days. So there was some time that I couldn't get outside to do my work. And then the work that I could do on the inside took a very long amount of time. So my big thing was I was taking a lot of photographs, and I was using a program that could turn them into a 3D model. And some of those runs on those stacks of photos would take anywhere between 3 hours and 12 hours. So for me, my biggest problems were typically when I wasn't able to get outside because of the weather. But you don't want to risk the safety of the crew. Safety of the crew is the first priority. And if the research has to wait a little bit, that's okay. And yeah, I think those would be my biggest things that I had to deal with. But that's what made it such a good analog is to realize that you can't always do what you want to do. Sometimes you have to take safety first, and especially when it's slick outside, you might fall over. That's really dangerous. So
That's true. That's true. You have to adjust to things that sometimes are unexpected. Question on sleeping. So how were the sleeping conditions? How did your bodies adjust to sleeping at MDRS? I'll ask Barbara that question.
Well, as we talked about at the very beginning here, the doors behind us are actually our sleeping quarters. They are about the size of a closet there. You know, they were nice in the sense of, you know, if you happen to like the feel of being kind of cozy, if you like to sleep in a tent or something like that, they kind of had that sense. But there really is not a lot of space, and some of them they're almost like bunk beds, in that you have to climb up over your storage area or over the cutout for your neighbor's room in order to get into your bed. So that was always, you're coming in or you're getting up in the morning, or you have to get up in the middle of the night to get a drink of water or something. And you have to be very careful climbing down from that upper bunk so that you don't trip and fall. It's very, just like it might be on Mars, it's very dry here in the Utah desert. And the hab is actually kept somewhat warm in the sleeping areas because we don't want the pipes to freeze. It does get very cold in the middle of the night, in the middle of the winter here. So it was a lot like, you know, sleeping somewhere where, you know, the weather is very dry, or like maybe when you turn on your furnace and for the first time in the winter and it's blowing that dry air on you. So it took a few days for us to kind of adjust to the high. We're also kind of high altitude. The air is very thin, much like it might be on Mars, that they may not fully pressurize to a sea level of pressure in order to make the construction of a habitat easier. So between the dry air and the high altitude and the heat and the really confined quarters, it took a couple of days for us to really feel like we were sleeping normally. You know, and yet we had very full days. We had to get up. That was one of the things too that I found very interesting and challenging about an analog environment, much like you would on a planetary or an interplanetary or a space station environment. It feels like you're always working, right? You work, you get up early in the morning, you talk about what you're going to do for the day, then you go out and you do it, but then it doesn't end because you have to do the maintenance and you have to do the data analysis. You have to write reports. We had to write reports every single day, multiple different reports about the status of the systems and all the information we gathered. And so then by the time you're finished with all of that, it's about time to go to bed again.
That's true. Does the commander still have the crew quarters with the window?
Yes. So I do, and I think it's probably good that I had, because the light does come in that little window anytime it's light out, and I'm the kind of person that's not bothered at all by really anything when I'm sleeping. So yeah. I know that some people that are light sensitive maybe would have been woken up by the light coming in the window, but for me it was fine. But the view out the window, especially with the day that it snowed, I opened my eyes and the first thing I saw out the window was the snow, and I was like, oh my gosh, it snowed.
Most of the rest of us don't have windows, and so for me too, it was also like I would wake up and I'd be, what time is it? It could be the middle of the night, it could be noon, and I wouldn't have any idea. It was very dark and enclosed. I could have slept all day if I had to. I'd had the time.
Hey guys, I'll ask this to the whole crew. It's a cute question. Somebody's asking, could you bring a pet to Mars or to MDRS?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't think that they would let us bring any pets, unfortunately. I did bring a little stuffed cat that my family gave me, and I think that might be it. But you know, I would love. Oh yeah, there's a little electronic cat. I don't know if I can tilt this up to see it here. Yeah, there it is. A little electronic cat up on the top there.
And the crew prior to us did bring a robotic baby seal for comfort purposes. We saw that in some of their pictures and reports. So I'm not sure about an actual dog or cat yet, but in the future, and in the spirit of really living and colonizing Mars, I'm sure there will be pets, but early on, I think it will be limited to pictures of our pets and robotic pets and stuffed pets until longer.
Yes, I think pets for human space exploration will be further down the road.
Yeah.
So I have a question for Ashley and Christine. Both of you guys have been in previous analog missions. So the question is, how does this compare to those experiences, and how does it compare to what you think future missions will be like?
Yeah, so I'll start with this one. So just quick background. So last year, I participated in a different astronaut analog simulation, and that was where we were living 8 months in total isolation and confinement. So that was more of an analog to test out crew dynamics, psychological health, emotional, mental health, cognitive maintenance of maintaining your cognitive abilities. Because as we go to Mars, those are going to be extremely, extremely long missions. And so you want to make sure that the crew members that are part of those missions are, able to, maintain or be resilient against those environments when you talk about mental, emotional, and psychological health. Our mission was a little bit different in that we were focused more on doing those EVAs, the extravehicular activities, and gathering data samples and being more in the field. So I would say it's more of an operational type of analog. And so both are very, very, very important because both are, looking at the psychological and mental health of astronauts and looking at, how we are actually going to conduct operations in this type of unique environment. Both of those are two different important aspects of future long-term, long-duration human exploration. And so, this is why we do so many different analogs, though, right? So we're trying to take data from, all different types of crew dynamics, all different types of environments, and put all of that together in order to create, the an ideal future Mars mission and crew. I don't know if you want to add to that, or
yeah, I'll add that in 2009 I was a crew member too. I think I mentioned earlier the Flashline Mars Arctic Research Station, which is also a Mars Society facility. It's similar to this one, but as of that time when I was there, and there are different facilities. The FMARS facility, when I was there, only had the habitat module and a couple of maintenance things on the exterior, but really just the single module. And I was there for a month, and there were a little bit different conditions as far as, getting there was a lot more difficult. And then operating there was a little bit trickier because there was 24-hour daylight in the summer there. So there was no stargazing at FMARS, but generally kind of the same goals and objectives, right? It's kind of like Ashley said, an operational analog so that we could to work on how we plan our EVAs, what type of science that we can do in the analog environment. And then also the things that we talked about earlier, just how do you operate different types of equipment in a spacesuit? How do you work in the constraints of not being able to just go outside whenever you want to and having to plan that all out? So very similar in that sense of being a field analog. And then a lot of differences between MDRS and FMARS in how we interact with mission support. So here at MDRS, we have on-site, what we would call tier 1 mission support, as if there was another crew also on Mars where we could ask questions regarding some of the systems. On FMARS, we did not have that. All mission support was done through sort of an email type comm delayed system. So we were a little bit more on our own in the FMARS environment. Here, we had more support for operational things. So I'd say like some of those things, add to the difficulty of the analog, and some of those things alleviate some of the pressures to allow you to do more research. So for example, here, the mission support crew took care of the power system for us. So we didn't have to spend our time here focused on power generation. Whereas at FMARS, that was all the crew's responsibility, maintaining the generator and whatnot. So just a little bit different way to try to alleviate some of the pressures in some cases, and in other cases, add more challenges to make it more Mars-like. So that's another thing too about the time. Here you only have 2 weeks. So if you really want to do a lot of good science, you need to maximize the time that you can be in simulation and also maximize the time that you are able to do your science. So I think that is a little bit different balance between the two. But also, as Ashley said, all of these different types of analogs, there are many. There are the ones we spoke about that we've been to, but there are lots more. And they all have different objectives, and they all try to simulate different parts of a real mission. And so you can't simulate every part, until you actually go. But you can simulate different segments and different combinations of things that are similar to a Mars mission.
Great answers. Yeah, we're gonna definitely need various analogs to be able to prepare for future missions down the road. We have a question for, let's see, I'll give it to Ali. How does your day job relate to the work that you've done at the Habitat?
Oh, so in my day job, I'm now really honored to be able to support the NASA Artemis program. So I'm in the EVA and Human Surface Mobility program office. So looking at all kinds of ways to use the spacesuits and rovers on the moon. So I definitely feel like being part of a crew and an analog is going to help me a lot when I'm writing requirements for sending people back to the moon. So I think it's very advantageous for people with all different types of roles in the space industry or even other industries to participate in an experience like this, to really understand what it takes to work with crewmates and all the things we were talking about with mixing in all the maintenance tasks with all of just like the regular experiments and stuff that we wanted to do. All of that really gives you a good perspective for what crews are going to experience when they're actually on these missions. So it's, for me, definitely useful and definitely relevant.
I just wanted to add quickly that, I think too, one of these experiments that we did, the Discord server, was actually conceived of by my high school aged kid. And I feel like all the kids on this conversation here have great ideas for things like, how would you take samples from the soil on Mars or on the moon? And how would you be able to pick something up from the surface in a big bulky spacesuit? Or, hey, how would you send texts to your friends while you're on Mars? So, it's relevant to what you're doing too, what you're studying and what you do in your day-to-day life. Think about how you might do that on a space station or in another planet, and send your ideas, because we really need these thinkers to all of you with your fresh thoughts and new ideas to help us figure out how we're going to explore the solar system.
That's great answers. Hey guys, so since we have the audience is a K to 12 audience, could one of you guys, I'll direct it to Matt, what got you interested in a STEM field, and what advice would you give to a student that wants to get involved in this area?
So my big sister went to space camp when I was a kid, and space camp is sort of a lot like this. This might be adult space camp here. And so she came home with a model rocket, and that's what got me hooked, was building model rockets when I was growing up.
Okay, good. Any of you guys want to add to that? What got you into STEM?
I'll go. So as a little child, like 2 and 3 years old, I got really fixated on the moon and the moon phases. And so I would carry this little calendar around, and I would tell everybody, oh, the moon's going to be full tonight, or the moon is going to be half full tonight. And, this tiny little kid telling you like what the moon is, everyone's like, well, why do you care? And why do you carry this, calendar around? And I was like, I want to go to space. So from the time I was tiny, I don't know, something got me interested in the moon and the stars and going to space and studying space. And from then on, and as you said, Alex, as an advice to a student in K through 12 type of environment, I would say, pick the courses that you think would best prepare you for a career in STEM. If that's what you're interested in, take as many science and math and engineering, computers courses that they offer at your school, and also start preparing for thinking about what you might want to study in college. And to go into STEM, you're most likely going to want to get an advanced degree. So if you do something as an undergraduate, and then think about what you might want to do as for a master's or a doctorate as well. And think about the things that really you're passionate about, because the way you do the best type of work in the STEM field is to be passionate about what you do. So find the thing that really gets you excited about the work.
And I
Great,
do
great
want to add,
answer.
if possible, I'd like to add a slightly different perspective to that as well, because I know we have K through 12 people on there, or students on there, which means, and two of our crewmates here mentioned that, you know, they were interested in this type of stuff at a very young age. But I want to say that this isn't something that you have to do right away from when you're a child. For example, for me,
Okay, I think, did we lose the crew, guys?
Yes, it looks like they're paused for the moment.
Okay. So that was gonna be the last question for them. So
and what you need to get to those future goals. So it's I just wanted to, you know, add that other perspective, and that, you know, it's not something you have to know when you're in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. It's something that you can realize later in life as well and be just as successful.
thank you for that perspective, Ashley. Appreciate it. And we'll have just one more quick question. Has this experience made you guys want to go to Mars, or done the opposite?
I'd love to go to Mars. I think I'd want to bring my family with me. That's the biggest, hardest part of doing this, was just being apart from family members and so forth. But
Okay, we seem to have lost.
oh, I think we got muted. Are we
Okay.
There?
okay?
No, yeah, you got,
Anyway.
we lost you guys for a little bit, but you guys are back. But we heard
Okay,
you
good.
guys. So, okay, well, that's it, guys. Thank you all for your time. Please give me a thumbs up online or a reaction if one of you guys would want to go one day go to Mars. Let's see. Okay, I see a lot of thumbs up. It could definitely be one of you. So with that, it's been an absolute pleasure being your moderator during today's event. I'll pass things over to Lauren.
Please join me in saying thank you to our moderator, and also thank you to the crew for joining us and answering all of your questions. We really appreciate their time. And again, we thank you all so much. So if you want to continue learning, please use the lesson plans on our website and look for more STEM events on our website as well. Thank you all for attending.